The world looks to California to answer the hard questions, for redemption, to introduce the unfamiliar, to be resilient. Because California bounces back, holds us accountable, values who we are, remains vigilant, defies those in our way, and stands for community. Here on the West Coast, we're at the center of it all. Los Angeles Times, the state of what's next.
Hey, Malcolm, you know that Audible's got a lot more than audiobooks?
Of course, podcasts,
Originals,
bestsellers,
future bestsellers,
sleep stories.
sleep story. What are you talking about, sleep story? Malcolm. Oh, wow. Malcolm. Malcolm. Hey, no, Roxy. Hey, Roxy, get out of Malcolm's house.
The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories, all in one place. Audible.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Varun Soni, and I'm the Dean of Religious and Spiritual Life at the University of Southern California, where I also serve as Vice Provost of Campus Wellness and Crisis Intervention. Thank you so much for tuning into the 26th Annual Los Angeles Times Festival of Books for our virtual panel this afternoon, Music, Money, and Mindfulness, presented by USC. It's totally appropriate that we're having this conversation today in Los Angeles, not only because Los Angeles is a global epicenter for music, money, and mindfulness, but also because it is one of the world's great cities for storytellers and for storytelling. And what I've seen across our beloved city of angels is that in so many different ways, music, money, and mindfulness empower us all to tell new stories about ourselves and about our world. And this has been especially critical over the last year of global pandemic, as many of us feel as though our stories are being told for us and not by us. As a result, we can feel disconnected in our own thriving and flourishing and disempowered from defining our own metrics of success and well-being. And so we come together today to reflect upon the intersection and transformation of music, money, and mindfulness in a rapidly changing world, and to think about how we can reclaim our own stories when we need them most. I am so grateful today to be joined for this timely conversation by an all-star lineup of USC luminaries. This afternoon, we have with us Jeff Brabeck, who teaches at the USC Thornton School of Music. He is Senior Vice President of Business Affairs at BMG Chrysalis and co-author of the very popular book series, Music, Money, and Success, The Insider's Guide to Making Money in the Music Business. We also have with us a legendary figure in the field of voice pedagogy, Lynn Helding, who is Professor of Practice in Voice and Vocal Pedagogy at USC, and author of the book, The Musician's Mind, Teaching, Learning, and Performance in the Age of Brain Science. And we have with us, my friend and yours, Richard Wolff, also known as Wolfie, professor at USC's Thornton School of Music, who is also an Emmy Award-winning composer, multi-platinum selling music producer, and author of the book, In Tune, Music as the Bridge to Mindfulness. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone who has joined us virtually to please support your local booksellers during this festival. Copies of our panelists' extraordinary books are available for purchase through the LA Times Bookshop store. So please make sure you pick up copies for yourselves and for everyone you know. Our panelists' books on mindfulness, music, and money are enlightening, empowering, and inspiring, and they really are gifts that keep on giving. So many, many thanks and a very warm welcome to our distinguished panelists, Jeff, Lynn, and Richard. I'm so grateful to all of you for joining us. Let's get started. And the first question is for you, Wolfie. In your book, In Tune, Music as a Bridge to Mindfulness, you focus on the intersection of music and mindfulness and view them both as transformative practices. What inspired you to write this book, and what did you discover in terms of the relationship between mindfulness and music?
Well, I first started to learn how to meditate when I was a senior in high school. I was 17 years old. And then I continued in college as my freshman year. But I wasn't very good at it. I couldn't really sit and focus and be undistracted. And I felt that this isn't for me. I can't do it. I just don't have a mind that's capable of focusing in an unfragmented way. So a few years later, I'd have a crisis and I'd say, well, I'm older now, and maybe I can meditate. And I'd sit down and try again. And again, my mind would go bonkers, bolting in every direction. I say, I'm a bad meditator. I can't do this. Well, fast forward to about 15 years ago, and one night I'm rushed to the ER, to the hospital, with what looks like a heart attack. It turns out it's not a heart attack, it's a panic attack. And I went to a panic specialist because I certainly did not want to suffer another panic/heart attack. And the panic specialist prescribed for me 10 minutes of meditation in the morning and 10 minutes of meditation at night. And when he said that, I'm thinking, my whole life I've been trying to meditate. I can't do it. I'm a bad meditator. But now he's telling me this is my cure. I better figure out how to do it. So now I take a different approach. I look at musical practice, which I've been doing my whole life, and I look at meditation as a practice like music is a practice. In music, I make time to practice, and I focus and concentrate. And when I play the wrong notes, I don't beat myself up. I just start again and keep going in a patient, calm way. So now when I start to meditate, I do what I do in music. I concentrate, I focus, and when I play wrong notes, this time I don't beat myself up. I just start again and keep going in a calm, patient way. And all of a sudden, it started to work. When I made that connection between musical practice and meditation practice, it worked. I was finally able to do it. Never had another panic attack. And when I made that connection, I saw all these other connections between the practices. And I saw what I call 12 bridges that connect these practices. Now, I wish I had time to go into all 12 bridges, but I have time. I'll just touch upon one of them, which is transcending the self. When we make music, it's not about us, it's about the music. We are not ego-driven, we are music-driven. We feel that we're making a connection with something that's beyond ourselves. That's why Eminem said, you better lose yourself in the music. Bruce Springsteen said, I have a hard time living with myself. But when I make music, I rise up and I vanish into the music. So when we make music, we're connecting with something, we're transcending ourselves. It's a high, like Springsteen said. He said he rises up. The problem is that music at some point is going to stop. And you have to climb down off your high. You have to climb down off the stage. And you have to live with yourself again. And you can feel very alone, worthless, and disconnected at that point. Well, mindful insight comes along and it tells you, you don't have to feel that you belong in the world only when you make music. Your whole life is inseparable and continuous with the world.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us, the origin story of the book and your own personal story of transformation. And I know that you've translated a lot of the lessons learned to the benefit of others. I've seen it with your students. I want to take that line of thought and move on to Lynn. Lynn, in your book, The Musician's Mind, Teaching, Learning, and Performance in the Age of Brain Science, you explore similar themes as Richard, but you do so from the perspective of cognitive science, which you define simply as how humans learn. For the musician who is making and performing music, how can our new understanding of brain science help musicians in their creative acts of music and meaning making?
Wow, that's such a great question. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about these things. This book was 10 years of research. And as you mentioned, I'm not so interested really in what happens in the brain when we listen to music, but I'm more interested in what happens to us, not just in the brain, but frankly, as humans, when we learn music. So my subtitle, Teaching, Learning, and Performance, really just encompasses all of that trajectory in the life of a musician. And each of these parameters are distinct. So teaching and learning is a partnership between the learner and the teacher. And the issue really, so many issues that are so interesting when you really get into cognitive science, which, as you mentioned, is how people learn. And when you really sort of look at how we bring information into our minds, how we attend to it, how we're able to manipulate ideas and then connect them to things we already know, it's a fascinating sort of life journey when you think about how we bring memories in, And one of the things I learned is, we're not a blank slate, particularly in terms of memory. We're always adding new things into what we already know. And so I sort of liken this to the dairy treat idea, where you have this foundation of ice cream and you put in some Heath Bar Crunch or some Skittles or whatever, and you mix it around. We're always mixing in these new things. And so we sort of have to be aware that while we're doing that, we're on this sort of foundation of our own life experience and the things that we've learned. So we're never really, our memories are kind of what we make them to be, which is itself, if you stop and think about it, a creative act in itself. And I think as a performer, I always felt so exhilarated by performing, but also was very humbled by how exhausted I always was afterwards. As a classical singer, it was such a brain workout. So classical singers also have to deal with text. We deal with emotion and meaning, but we deal with text. And classical singers deal with text in languages that are not our own. We expect our classical singers to be proficient in as many as 4 languages. So it's quite a brain workout in and of itself. And then I think in terms of meaning making, that I just love what Wolfie said about it's not about you, it's not about yourself, it's about hitching yourself to a higher purpose, which is why my book ends with a chapter called Emotion, Empathy, and the Unification of Art and Science. And I sometimes tag on, and the meaning of life, right? Because why we do music is such an important question. And I think, it connects us with the things that make us most human and, dare I say, humane. So that's, I think, a great way to sort of enter into this conversation today.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Lynn. Jeff, I'm going to turn to you. Wolfie talked about mindfulness as a creative act. Lynn talked about music making as a creative act. I think money making is also a creative act, especially in this day and age. And you and your brother just released the 8th edition of your very popular and influential book series, Music, Money, and Success, The Insider's Guide to Making Money in the Music Business. So much has happened in the music business since the first edition of this book, especially as we move from an analog world into a digital one. What has changed since your first edition, and what advice would you give music professionals in terms of monetizing and distributing music in this new online streaming world of ours?
I appreciate that. I really respect what the other 2 panelists have said on a different level. I feel like saying, here comes the crass portion of the panel. Our book on the back page says music is a business, and that's exactly what it is. As far as changes, just with our book alone, it's gone from 412 pages to 656 in the 8 editions. Basically, what are the changes? I'm just going to give you a really quick overview of some of the fields. The overall feeling is more ways to earn money, more ways to have your music distributed, and more monitoring of the performances, so at least you're getting credit and royalties what you're actually doing. I'm going to just touch upon just a few of the major areas. Audio recordings. So there's something called a mechanical right, a mechanical royalty, which is paid to songwriters and music publishers for each time that their composition is sold on an audio recording. Now, from the time we wrote the book, it went from vinyl to audio cassettes to CDs to downloads, and now to streaming is the most important way that people consume music. At one time, the royalty rates were very, very simple, 9.1 cents every time a song was downloaded or put on an album. Being simplistic right now, but it's a fairly easy formula. With interactive streaming, if your song is on Spotify or Amazon, Apple, Pandora, or Google, and interactive streaming is basically where the listener can choose exactly the master and the song that they want to listen to. It's not like listening to a radio station, but there's a mechanical right there for interactive streaming that's payable to songwriters and music publishers. It's collected by the Mechanical Licensing Collective, which is a brand new organization, nonprofit, which was established by the Music Modernization Act. I'm actually on the board with other publishers and songwriters who are on the board of directors of the organization. And our role is to monitor, collect, and license, performances of compositions on the various interactive sites. And the problem right now is that the Copyright Royalty Board really increased the rates for songwriters and music publishers, but 4 of the major digital service companies have appealed the increased rates, so we're now in an interim period. We'll see where that goes, but we feel very confident. Television has changed a lot. Years ago, it was basically 5-year licenses. If, in fact, you license one of your songs into a television show. Now it's gone to life of copyright, all media excluding theatrical. If you're in a dramatic show, or if you're in a voice like a music-centric show with a Masked Singer, it's basically short-term licenses, US and Canada, limited territory with lots of options to expand the use of the program by the producers. I was very depressed a couple of weeks ago with the Masked Singer because Kermit the Frog was voted off as the first contestant. So I may never watch that show again because of that, I must say. But lots of ways to earn money in TV. There's 500 scripted shows. Scripted shows meaning they're either 8 to 22 episodes. Lots of ways to have music licensed. So it's a really good area. Performance income has gone up substantially. At one time back in 1992 or so, ASCAP and BMI were collecting $670 million. They are now up to $2.6 billion. So you can see that there's a lot more users using money. There's a lot more licensing and a lot more money to go around to songwriters and music publishers for their performances. The societies are actually monitoring 5 trillion performances right now. So it's just spectacular what the monitoring can be. So you're pretty much guaranteed that if you have a performance on one of the digital services, you are going to be tracked. Holograms were never around. Now we've got a Buddy Holly and Roy Orbison tour going on. That was an area that people had not even heard of back in the day. Theater has changed somewhat also. Musical theater, at one time was only the Dramatists Guild, where the writers and composers and lyricists and librettists used to share in from 4.5% to 6% of the box office receipts. Now there's a royalty pool situation where all the royalty participants pretty much share in the operating profits of the musical, somewhat different. Video games were not even in existence when Todd and I wrote the book. There was no chapter. The same was true of apps, but with video games, basically they're licensed right now on a flat fee basis or a royalty fee basis, depending on the type of game. The music and dance-centric games are a royalty-based situation, which can mean an awful lot of money. There's also downloadable content, so if you're not into the game itself, you can be downloaded into the game by the participants. There are also extra money if your song is in a concert performance on a digital situation like Fortnite. Record contracts have changed a lot for 360-degree deals, marketing distribution deals, royalty participation deals, net profit participation deals, sound exchange, it was collecting $963 million on behalf of artists. So there's been a lot of changes, over the years, many of which have been very, very positive, especially in the way that things are monitored and paid on. Just a quick advice for writers and music, or primarily songwriters, which is what we geared the book about, was know the business and parameters of the primary areas that you're trying to license your music to. You can't look like an amateur. That's why you've got to force yourself to at least know a bit about the business aspects of the music. And I'll tell you what, it pays off in the end, because if a licensor comes to you and asks to use your song or even your master recording, if you can make a quick decision, because you know what they're looking for, what type of license terms are involved in this particular field, you can license them immediately, quickly, and the user will always say, this person's a professional, and so let's go back to that person if, in fact, we have other music needs. So it's really learning the business. If you're successful, you've got a team around you, but most songwriters at the start of their career do not have a team. That's why you need to educate yourself.
Thank you for that. So much has changed in such a short period of time. I can't wait to read the 9th edition, which must include NFTs and the new royalty structures that they will usher in as well. So thank you for sharing that, Jeff. I'm going to ask a question now to the panel as a whole. And I want to really sort of bring us to this current moment. The reason we're doing this online in Zoom is because we've had a year unlike any other. Over the course of the last year, we've experienced firsthand how COVID-19 has significantly disrupted our lives, and including our practices around music, money, and mindfulness. And so I want to ask each of you, how has COVID changed the work that you do with music or mindfulness or money? And what have you learned over the last year? And Lynn, I'd like to start with you because COVID has really disrupted the ability for many people to perform music, for music to tour, for students of music who want to do ensemble work. And I know you've been on the front line of all that. So what are the challenges and potential opportunities that you've seen in terms of the work that you do that have arisen because of COVID?
Well, I would say, I have several answers. One has to do with myself as a professional. So as a writer, I mean, I have to say I've been extremely fortunate that COVID has not touched my family, my immediate family. I'm just so fortunate for that. And so I'm also not a working parent. My children are grown. And so I really have been feeling for my colleagues with children at home. But for me, it's actually been kind of a blessing, I have to be honest and say, the solitude, the quiet, the ability to kind of go inside and think big thoughts and have time to actually write them down and explore them in my writing has been wonderful. For my students, of course, it's a different story, and I teach voice, and so I know they've mourned their social connections. They've mourned the loss of being able to make music with other singers, with their pianists especially. However, I have to say, I had sort of an aha moment last summer when I was asked to speak at a conference that all of our conferences got put online, and I was going to speak about something completely different, and I changed my mind at the last minute, and I wrote an article, and I called it Cognition in Corona, because I was trying to think about how has our thinking changed during Corona, rather than just mourning what we've lost. And so I found that for my students, honestly, their learning has gone through the roof, I think. I'm not sure they think so, but I think their learning has been so much improved by once they got over the loss, right, of these things. And also because they've had to recommit themselves. Once again, we have this theme today of it's got to be something higher. Because especially in classical music, heaven knows it doesn't pay that much. And so it has to give you the fruits of itself in other ways. The ability to interact daily with great poetry, great literature, great ideas has to be itself more sustaining. And so my students this year, I've seen them really have to recommit to this idea because there aren't as many distractions, I think. And I mean distractions in a good way, too. Just as you move through your daily life, there are things that come and go in our world that capture our attention, and often in good ways. But they're sort of been forced to really do these deep dives in this deep recommittance to the art. And I think that's been hard. But in my book, I write about this idea, which is not mine. It comes from Robert Bjork, a psychologist, who called it desirable difficulties. And when I first found that phrase over 10 years ago, I just thought that's a beautiful idea to live by. That these difficulties that come along, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, that idea. But it's a more sort of poetic take on that idea. And that's what I've observed in my teaching.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I love that this has also been a generative time for people to really think deeply about what matters to them, why does it matter to them, what makes them human, what is their role, not just in the world, but in the universe. The big questions that make us human. I think times of challenge really give us unique opportunities to reflect upon those questions. And so, Wolfie, what I've seen is that a lot of students have come to mindfulness practice or spiritual practice during COVID. Our mindfulness classes are oversubscribed. 40% of all college students have started a new spiritual or mental health practice during COVID. So there is a self-awareness that this is an opportunity to grow deeper in one's own self and one's own well-being. What have you seen, Wolfie, in terms of COVID's impact on mindfulness or mindfulness practice, or maybe from students who have a mindfulness practice already or who've come to one for the first time?
Well, in the world at large, outside of the creative community, and including the creative community, there was, before COVID, this sort of mental health crisis which was building. It was a challenge of mental health issues that was pretty endemic throughout society. Part of the reason at the time, we talk about distractions, but at that time there was what we call weapons of mass distraction. And a distracted mind is not a happy mind. And so when COVID came along, that kind of intensified all these mental health challenges that people were suffering from, and whether it's anxiety, fear, depression, panic, loneliness, all of these afflictive negative emotions were intensified. And I think, as you mentioned, people turn towards what could help them as therapies and shore up their mental health. And part of that is mindfulness and meditation practices. And so, yes, our classes before COVID were always full. So there was always that interest. But now you hear from former students and colleagues who are really interested either in diving back into the practice or taking the practice a step further or starting a practice. In the music business particularly, we have always had to wrestle with the four horsemen of the musical apocalypse, which has threatened the music community from day one, which is anxiety, depression, addiction, and suicidal tendencies. And what is heartening actually now with COVID is that there is a raised awareness in the music community that we have these very pronounced mental health challenges in our community, and we need to help people, and we need to provide them resources to improve their mental health. And this has been happening, actually. If you look at Music Cares, which is the charitable arm of the Recording Academy, they've raised 4 times the money during COVID than they raised before, and they've been able to distribute 4 times the money to musicians, tens of millions of dollars to musicians. And a lot of it goes to recovery from addiction and helping with mental health therapies, psychological therapies, etc. So there's a hope that now that there is this consciousness about mental health in the music community, that those people that are in power will take more responsibility for the mental health of people in the industry, especially for creatives who are vulnerable and more sensitive than most to uncomfortable and negative thoughts and emotions.
Thank you for that, Wolfie. Jeff, I want to bring this to you. You know, these times of great disruption can also be times of innovation. I've seen that in higher education. Industries will be changed in ways that they'll never go back to because of COVID. Of course, the music industry is going to be one of those industries, given the fact that we had a year without live music, that people are recording and consuming and sharing music in very different ways. What have you seen over the course of the year in terms of the music business? And what has the impact been? What would you tell people who are interested in coming to the business that you might not have told them even a year ago?
Well, I must say there are pretty much 2 aspects which I'll talk about, just what the effects have been. Obviously, the effects have been dramatic in the worst sense of the word with respect to licensing music for television programs or motion pictures. You know, obviously, most of TV production was shut down, other than the dance or music-centric shows like The Voice, The Masked Singer, et cetera. So there was still licensing there, but a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential income for songwriters and for music who score, as well as for music libraries, dried up substantially because there was no new production. Film production was very, very limited, so that had a major effect. Broadway, being shut down was a total disaster. A lot of songwriters and music publishers have songs in what is known as catalog musicals. all of those royalties, which can be very substantially stopped, from day one and have still not recovered. Hopefully that will start later in the year. So there have been some really dramatic effects. The monies that ASCAP and BMI and the Performance Rights Societies collect from bars, grills, live concerts, etc. That's pretty much, stopped as well. And that affects writers or songwriters' royalty income, because those organizations, their role is to collect money for those areas and distribute them out to the writers and publishers. Fortunately, the PROs, Performance Rights Societies, do have licenses with all the various networks and streaming services. So there is money coming in as things are performed. Thank God for the PROs for back-end royalties. Fine, you may not be getting synchronization income, and synchronization income is when you actually license a song to a television show or a motion picture. But the back-end royalties, ASCAP and BMI, GMR, and CSAC are collecting, and they're distributing it. So because there are things on TV, it's just there weren't many new things on TV, but what's on TV is actually being collected by the societies. Personally, I'll just give you a sense. It's, I've been working from home for, since March, obviously. The one good thing about it was that, my 2.5 to 3 hour drive time, aggregate every day, it's just not there. So that was a positive. I found myself working more because of that and starting earlier, but we learned to be self-sufficient at home. One thing that's really, really emphasized, and it's strengthened collaboration between the people who count on each other in the company that I'm working for, BMG. This is true of every music publishing company, every record company. With BMG, we've got an office in New York, Nashville, and LA. So, we were always used to dealing with, things by email or Zoom calls, et cetera. But, with all this being at home, we really had to, just dig deep and say, okay, this is not going to change, and we've got to do what we can. Fortunately, we were given the tools to do, our job. My main role is in acquisitions. When we look at a company that we're buying or a group of songs that we're buying, most of the research is done online. So I could be anywhere to do what I do, but the collaboration between all the various departments, the royalty departments, the administrative departments, the creative departments, the legal department and business affairs department, we all need each other. And I must say, COVID and the experience that all of us are having right now have really strengthened that relationship. So that's a real positive. And that's not going to change. I mean, all of us are closer because of it. And even when we go back to the office, which will happen at some time, I feel it's going to be very flexible hours, which I think is good for all employees. So there have been positives and negatives. Thank God, I look around and I'm lucky. Some people we know have gotten COVID, but I look at health. That's a thing to wake up every morning and say, it's a good day.
Thank you, Jeff. I agree with you. I don't think we'll ever take each other for granted again. The department meetings that we used to roll our eyes about, we'll celebrate those. Our lunch meetings will be something to really look forward to. We're not going to take each other for granted again. So thank you for sharing that, Jeff. I do appreciate that. I think one of the things that connects all of us on this panel is that we teach because we really care about young people. We have areas of practice outside the university, but we come to the university because we care about young people. And one of the things I've noticed with young people, our students, is they often wrestle with the definition of success. And they sometimes struggle to articulate their own internal metrics of success. Instead, they're hyper-focused on other people's external markers of success. And in some ways, we create those markers for them. Get these grades, get this score, get this degree, get this job, then you'll have the right life. That's something that we do as a society, and quite frankly, something we do as a university as well. And that doesn't always lead to healthy or positive outcomes in terms of students' own sense of well-being. So I want to ask this question to the panel as a whole. In terms of music, money, and mindfulness, in terms of the work you do, especially with students, what does success look like for you? And what are your metrics of success? Let's start with Wolfie, and let's start with mindfulness, Wolfie. What students are so type A at USC, they want to do everything right, but what does it mean to do mindfulness right? What does success mean, and how do you think about it with your students?
Well, I think you know that this whole concept of winning and losing and success and failure is antithetical to mindfulness culture. But I'll work with you here. Um, I just want to define mindfulness for a second because we throw around these terms, and I've been throwing around the terms concentration, mindfulness, and meditation. So in meditation, we're developing concentration and we're developing mindfulness. And it's kind of like thinking about you're rehearsing to go on stage, right? And you're rehearsing with the band, that you're practicing yourself. And that's meditation. By the way, meditation is a whole range of spectrum of things, and we're just focusing on these two right now. What happens with mindfulness, now you're going on the world stage and you're performing what you've been practicing. So that's something that you practice on a daily moment-to-moment basis. And I like the kind of the definition that Kendrick Lamar gave when they asked him why he meditates. He gave a definition of mindfulness, and he said, I need to create the space in order to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and what I'm feeling. So it's about creating space. It's about creating critical distance between what is happening and your perception of what is happening, between the stimuli and the response. So the question I would ask is about the locus of control. You know that you can't control most things in your life. The one thing you can control is how you respond to them. So I would ask, are you responding, and are most of your responses as calm and composed and compassionate as they possibly can be? That's the first question I'd ask. Another question I would ask is, how are you managing your don't know mind? People associate mindfulness with what you know, how you know it. And that's absolutely right. I mean, mindfulness can be described as knowing what is happening while it is happening without getting all entangled in the storyline. Some people call it unentangled knowing. But mindfulness is also about knowing that you don't know, knowing that reality is too complex, it's multidimensional, it's impermanent, it's always in flux, and you cannot capture it with an idea or a concept. So you know that your ideas of what is happening or what has happened and your concepts of reality are inherently imperfect and biased. And they're also biased because of the ego. And the ego is not your amigo.
I like that.
And finally,
I'm gonna steal that, Wolfie.
Finally, I would ask, if I have three things I would ask, is how's your beginner's mind? Beginner's mind is the ability to have a sense of wonder and awe and joy about the world. Think about when you were a child, the first time you saw a cat, or the first time you saw a cloud. I mean, you reacted with wonder and curiosity. Probably you asked a million questions. Well, we lose that beginner's mind as we get older. And we think it's important to have that fresh approach that you can appreciate your situation and appreciate things in general with a sense of wonder and a sense of joy. Are you maintaining your sense of playfulness and levity and joy in your life?
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Wolfie. Lynn, I'm going to turn this question to you about success. What does success look like for you and your students? What are the metrics in terms of musical performance, composition, et cetera? How do you think about it with your students?
I'm so glad you asked me, because everything Wolfie said, I'm just sitting here taking notes going, yes, yes, yes. This connects with so much of the work that I've done. So I want to start with something that he ended with. And I was asked this question. I was in a book club yesterday, and they asked me, what are the things that you see that hold students back? And I said, just that they need to learn how to be better learners. So it's the same thing that Wolfie was talking about, you know, that sort of, that joy in learning. I say in the book that learning is messy. It's dynamic, it's transitive. The actual learning component of learning in cognitive science is, you know, if you blink, you miss it, kind of. So we're either getting ready to learn by paying attention, or it's done, it's past tense, it's in the memory banks. But the actual learning moment is quite dynamic. It's messy. Students should never confuse performance with learning, ever. performance is this freeze frame moment in time, like we're doing right now. And, you don't want to be experimenting when you're performing. You want to sort of put your best self forward. That's what we train for. But so much of that needs to be built on this sort of, it's not just a foundation, it's kind of a bulwark, I think, of learning, where you've approached it, as Wolfie said, with this kind of innocence, playfulness, it's all good kind of attitude. And so I'm really interested in teaching people how to learn. And also, just the training for interruptions. That's another thing that I think so to answer your question, what does success look like? I'm going to give it this wonderful word, which is mastery, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that everything's perfect and we're all lucked up. I think it's quite the opposite. It means that whatever is sort of thrown at you, like a downhill skier, you adjust for the conditions. And this is very much the life that I would know, which is classical singing. It's never the same. The acoustics are different. The piano that your pianist is playing on is different. The hall is different. People who come into the audience, each one of those people is bringing their life experiences and their expectations for you into the hall. So you have to be ready to kind of rock and roll with it. It's almost like doing improv. But if you've mastered your technique, and also if, as we said earlier, if you understand why you're doing what you're doing, it becomes this really invigorating experience and not a depleting experience. And that's what I hope for my students. That's what I hope that they understand, that they may not make a lot of money as a classical singer, but I made enough, and more importantly, it's just been a wonderful life. I've been all over the world. I've had all kinds of really fascinating experiences that I could only have if I was open to learning. So I think that is, for me, that's my marker of success, is how well my students can actually take in all the information, and that includes the sensory information, the oral information, all the feedback that they get while they're learning, which feedback is a really important component in cognitive science. So for singers, it's the information that their bodies give them, which includes hearing and sensation, but it also includes the verbal feedback of a teacher and how they put all those things on the scale and decide who to listen to or what to listen to as they're learning. It requires a kind of openness, certainly, but a sort of joy in all of that. I call it fizzing, when things are fizzing and moving around. I just said to a student last week, I want you to drop an Alka-Seltzer in that. Let's just pop this up and kind of get things moving around a little bit. And I think if they can do that without being completely stymied by that, they're in this constant learning mode, which is a kind of mindfulness mode. And I would define that as being a successful human, because learning is certainly an important part of being human, but we might even say it's the most important activity that we do from the moment we're born.
Yep, throughout our lives. Thank you for that, Lynn. Jeff, I'm going to turn this question to you. Your book is actually called Music, Money, and Success. And so what does success mean in the work that you do in the music business? What are the metrics? And is money making itself success, or is money making the byproduct of other kinds of success? How do you think about this?
Yeah, I tell you what, my definition of success is very, very simple. It's completion of something that you set out to create. As simple as that. Economic success, recognition success, that may or may not come, but that's not the definition that I look at, for myself and for people. I'll give you just a couple quick examples. Take Todd and myself. When we were in law school, we were, playing in bands. Success was us to get a gig at a village, Greenwich Village Club. I mean, that was success. We actually recorded a demo. We got a record contract, which was not easy back in those days. We had a record released, while we were in law school. Oh, that's that's us with the group.
Some nice facial hair.
Yeah, yes, we had a great review from kind of a great review from Billboard. It was that underground sound with pop possibilities. Now, it didn't say probabilities, which we should have known. Also, when that review came out, on the cover of one of the trade magazines was Cream. Now, Cream, if anyone knows, heavy rock and roll. Here, Todd and I were soft rock and roll, really nice, kind of folksy stuff. Absolutely no sales, but that was a success to us. We did something that many people couldn't do at the time, and we did it, even though, we didn't succeed as recording artists. Fortunately, we had gone to law school, so we continued our career as lawyers in the music, first of all, legal services, and then with ASCAP and so on after that. The other thing is, I look at success for people who want to do something and create possibility or create opportunities for themselves. You just don't sit back and let things come to you. That's success. Give you a quick example on the book. Many years ago, when Todd and I wanted to write a book, no one knew us as authors. We were two young guys, two young lawyers who just had started ASCAP, but we knew that there was a need to teach songwriters how the business works. Only because there was really nothing around when Todd and I, first started getting into the business. We started to write articles on aspects of the industry that we knew, for publications such as Hollywood Reporter, Score Magazine, which is Composers Guild. We did it for no fee whatsoever, but we always kept the copyright. But little by little, we got a reputation that these guys are authors. They are just not music industry people. And then Todd and I had the fortunate experience of winning the Deems Taylor Award for the articles that we did for Hollywood Reporter and Score Magazine. At the event, the publisher of music sales was accepting a book award. We won for articles. So what did we do? We walked up to the head of the publishing company of music sales and said, hey, I'm Jeff and Todd, or we said, we're Jeff and Todd Brabeck. We wrote all these articles. We just won this award for creative writing. We have this book that we'd like to have published, and we started the ball rolling. We already had about 500 pages done over probably a 10-year period. Just like Lynn, it takes a long time to write a book. But we pushed the envelope. We introduced ourselves. They said, okay, what do you have? Let us see a chapter. We did a prospectus also on the book, and they said, we like it. It took us another year to finish the book off. We came to them with a 1,000-page tome. The editor cut it down to about 460 pages. That was brutal, but we thank that editor to this day. But it was just perseverance, belief in yourself. That's success to me. Whether you actually succeed, it doesn't matter. It's just the internal success is all you really need.
I love that. I love that definition, Jeff. Thanks for sharing it with us. I'm going to carry that with me because it allows you to, in some ways, be the author of your own success, to create your own metrics and to feel proactive in the outcomes. So it's not defined by the external gatekeepers. It's you articulating a goal and achieving it. So I love that. We have time for one more question for each of the panelists. I'm going to go to the audience questions now. I'm going to ask each of the panelists a question from the audience. I'm going to start with a question from Andrew. And Jeff, this is a question for you. You've answered some of this, but maybe there's more that you can add. And Andrew asks, how should an aspiring songwriter approach a professional career? Would you advise them? What would you advise in terms of developing relationships with artists or publishers? And are there still A&R people who find material, or is that a thing of the past?
Fascinating. Well, when you talk about being a songwriter, there are two types of writer. One, if you're a performer, it's an awful lot easier because you can actually go out and perform your works. If you're a pure songwriter, Nashville is a songwriter city where there are a lot of songwriters who are non-performers. But if you're a performer, you've got a leg up because you can actually put your stuff out there. Lots of ways to go about it. Go to festivals, try to get yourself involved. South by Southwest, Americana in Nashville, Cutting Edge in New Orleans. There are showcases. There are ASCAP and BMI showcases that you can get involved in. The performance rights societies are very, very instrumental in introducing people to music publishers. Obviously In today's age, you need a video in most respects to get your song known. And that's very important, so you have to go that aspect as well. There are great songwriter organizations out there like NSAI in Nashville. SONA is another great one. It's funny, with music publishers, we still have people that are looking for material and great songs. A music publisher deals in songs. We're interested in records, obviously, and BMG has a record division as well. But on the publishing side, we look at the material itself and what the material says. So we still have people looking. Look, a lot of them are looking at social media. They're looking at clubs. They're looking at the songwriter conferences where people perform. They're looking at SoundCloud, they're looking at Instagram, they're looking at Spotify, they're looking at engagement of fans. There's a whole bunch of ways right now. And a lot of times we get referrals from the writers who are assigned to us, or even the recording artists who are assigned to us, who say, there's a great writer out there I think you guys should hear. And many of the introductions come from managers, lawyers, just people of that ilk sometimes. But showcases are still important, but we look at the song itself. If the song has a message and a song has a life, that's what we look for. And I must say, if you're a songwriter these days, be daring with your songwriting. That will be noticed. If you're just playing the same route, great. There are lots of great songs still being written that way, but it has to catch the ear, of music publishers right now. So that's really important. Be daring.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm gonna ask my next question. It comes from Lenka, and this is gonna be for Richard. Wolfie, here's a question from Lenka. Do you meditate in silence or with some music on? And if you meditate with music, what do you listen to?
That's a great question. I get asked that a lot, and it's a great question because music has a great purpose in meditation, but it also has limitations. So music is great for setting a mood, getting you to calm down, getting you to focus, to concentrate. It's one of the easiest things to concentrate on, I think, is to listen to a piece of music. And if that's your goal about meditation, if you just want to settle down, stabilize your mind, calm down, and maybe sleep, go to sleep afterwards, then meditating to music works for many, many people and is great. But as I mentioned before, music and meditation are spectrums. Just like music has many genres in it and subgenres, you've got hip hop and a subgenre of trap or Brooklyn drill. In meditation, you have subgenres, and maybe you want to go beyond just being calm. Maybe you want to explore more about what the self is, more pure awareness. And if so, if you want to get other insights and make other discoveries, music can hold you back because you are lashed to the agenda of whoever made that music, the composer, the producer, the pianist. Your attention is tethered to wherever they want you to go. And in mindfulness and in pure awareness, you want to have the freedom to just flow with whatever and wherever awareness takes you. You want to be able to have the freedom to listen to your inner sound and your inner silence. Music is a bridge to a place. And it's beautiful for that. And it's great to know that if you're into music and you've been a musician at any point in your life or you're a music lover, you can do this other practice of meditation and mindfulness. But it is not that place. Music is a path, but it's not the destination, because the destination is beyond sound and beyond silence. To answer quickly, if I meditate, so on top of that, to music, I would say I have 2 meditations daily. I never meditate to music on retreat or my 1 day of mindfulness, but on a daily basis. I never use it in the morning, but sometimes at night, I will meditate to calm down and de-stress, and I will meditate to music. I used to listen to a band called Easter Island Head, which was playing mallets on an open tuning guitar. And now I listen to music that I've written to meditate to. And I like minimalist classical music and weird percussion stuff. But yes, I use it to calm down sometimes when I feel like I need an extra boost at night to help.
Thank you. And Lynn, we have a question from Jessica. I'm going to paraphrase a little, and this is for you. Jessica writes, music can be therapeutic, but the business side of it can be detrimental to one's mental health. How might we all contribute to a change in culture or otherwise to see a shift in the well-being of musicians? And I'll add, especially in terms of what you see with performance anxiety and other issues that your students are wrestling with.
Oh boy, that's such a big question. Well, I'll start with the anxiety part of it, and then I want to make sure to say something about the mental health aspect. I didn't originally plan to write a chapter about performance anxiety, but what I learned pretty quickly was you can't write a book about music and the mind and not include performance anxiety. So there's a lot to say about that. There is a strong move afoot to create music performance anxiety as its own special category, distinct from other kinds of anxieties. There's a lot to that. You'd have to read my book to find out. You'd also want to read Diana Kenny, literally wrote the book on music performance anxiety and is behind this move to make it its own special category. But again, I think it's this idea that as long as we're focused on the self, it's self-defeating. It also seems to really feed into performance anxiety. In my world of singing, we say, there's an old saying that if you do an audition and you don't get the job, it's like someone said, I don't like your face. Instead of, I don't like your playing, it's, I don't like your face. And even worse, I don't like you. So it can, all those auditions, it can be filled with rejection and real mental health challenges. So it's no wonder that performance anxiety is so high among musicians. I'm not a professional, I'm not a clinician, so this is just based on what I've researched. There is a lot to be said for meditation, as Wolfie has been talking about. Meditation and walking meditation, which certain kinds of yoga seem to be, there's no cure for music performance anxiety. Most people who have it just have to manage it. But the strongest systems that have been shown to be helpful are meditation and walking meditation, yoga. In terms of what's going to happen in the culture, I know we're almost out of time, and I would just say this, that my hope and honestly my prognosis, if I might, is that because we've been living so apart this last year, a little over a year with COVID, that we're all going to be just so happy to see each other and communicate with each other, that I'm hoping it's going to be a new chapter, at least among musicians, about collaborating and sharing and being open to learning and open to the messy dynamism of it, rather than seeking some kind of performance perfection that doesn't really exist.
Thank you for that, Lynn. We just have a few more minutes. I'm going to ask a final question. We'll do it lightning round style, so just keep our answers a little brief. And it's a question actually from the audience that I think is a really nice way to end our conversation today. What connects all of us, besides our love for sort of teaching and the university and young people and the life of the mind, is music. And we've all had our own lives in music. And so this question comes from Douglas. And Douglas asks the panel as a whole, what has music taught you about yourself? And why don't we start with Jeff? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but what has music taught you about yourself?
Yeah, let me just throw one thing out, because what Wolfie was saying, music to meditate by, for me, it's anything by Jackson Browne or Neil Young. Yeah, as simple as that. That will take me to another place. What music, what has done for me is just, it's made me introspective. It's made me feel that, it's taken me to a place where, I can say that I've succeeded in doing something. And I must say, music just calms me down and just gets me very introspective. So it's a life force that you can't get anywhere else. Not motion pictures, not television, not anything else. It's just music is just a calming and introspective factor in my life.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Wolfie, what does music taught you about yourself?
You know, it's what it's taught me is I'm always hearing music. I can't get away from it, no matter how much I try. If I'm at home, I'm going to play the piano. If I'm riding on a subway, I'm going to write a song to the rhythm of the wheels. It's involuntary. It's something I've been doing since I was 5, just hearing music always, and or silence. But it's not something that I can control. And you know, people ask me about, has mindfulness helped you write music? And I got to say, I don't think so, because I've been writing music, you know, since I was a child. It's just something that's like breathing to me. And I've been very fortunate, and I'm very grateful that I've been able to do it as a livelihood. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful that I was taught and had to practice and had the kind of rigorous background that Lynn teaches. And that enabled me to find meditation and mindfulness.
Lynn, you have the final word this evening. What has music taught you about yourself?
Oh, wow. Well, it's taken me around the world. I already said that, but I guess I would have to say it's taught me 2 things. It's taught me to be empathetic, and next to parenting, performing in music has been the most humbling experience of my life. And that is an empathy planter, if there wasn't one. So that's what it's done for me. It's made me more human.
Well, we all need that right now. Thank you so much, Jeff, Lynn, and Richard, for your generosity of time and spirit, and for sharing your wisdom and insight with us today. Many thanks to everyone who tuned in for our special panel discussion today as well, especially to the organizers, the Los Angeles Times, Festival of Books, and the University of Southern California. Thank you for bringing us together. Please don't forget to purchase copies of these authors' amazing books through the LA Times bookshop store, and give copies to everyone you know and love. And until we meet again, please take good care and fight on. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.